So information architecture involves a number of things. Most of the time when people, well, a lot of the time, I'm not saying most of the time, architecture, which I think I spelled wrong. Very often mean slightly different things, but what I'm going to mean by it is it involves several sort of components to it. It involves the information, the actual sort of data, involves how you organize and present it, and it involves the perception. You're also thinking about not just where am I going to put the stuff, but what message is where I put it going to give the people who come and see it. So these are the sort of main aspects of it. And what happens, what we're going to be dealing with today is not really presentation and perception very much, although it will come into it. We're really going to be interested in information. What I'm going to mean by, I was really good if I don't know how to do this thing with empty. What I mean by information modeling, information modeling is what the actual information is. I'm not concerned with how I'm going to implement it on my website. I'm just concerned about understanding the model of my information. What does my information look like? What is it that it does? What is the information? What's its nature? How does the different parts of it relate to other parts of it? Which things are sort of isolated on their own? And of course, I don't have my handy little scratch pad open. So if you pardon me, I'm just going to load a library because it doesn't do it automatically. I'm using a little application thing called draw.io, which is open source. Draw.io is the URL. It actually integrates with, you can do it on your desktop, you can do it, integrates with Google Drive and a couple other things that it integrates with, and it's really terrific. I use it with a Google Team Drive with Stanford Nano Application Facility, and it's really helpful to have everybody able to see the same thing. So, oh yeah, of course it's not set up my things to be what I want, but that's all right. So information modeling, you say, so this is the information, and then the data modeling is when I take that information that I have understood with all its relationships, and I make it, decide how I'm going to implement it technically in my website. So that's the basic concepts of these terms and how I'm using them. So what I've just done here, I can do this on a whiteboard. In fact, I was planning to do this on a whiteboard until I realized that for Zoom people, that would be really no fun. So we're doing it, I'm doing it in this little app that I just told you about, draw.io. And what we're gonna do is we're actually just gonna do a live data model. And we're going to, the thing that we're going to be modeling actually is what we'd need for a conference. You just figure you can relate to this. Departments have conferences, companies have conferences. So to start with, what I'd just like to ask you is, let's just start on our information. What is the information that we would need if we were going to be doing a conference website? What is one of the things that we're going to want to talk about or have information on? So name of the conference. All right, so let's see. I'm going to actually say the whole thing's the conference, so we're not going to worry about that too much. All right, so we have times and location. That's again for the conference itself. So I'm going to actually let's just call this. We'll call this conference. The conference, and it's going to have the things that we care about is it has a name. It has a time. What other things do we need to know about for a conference? So, pardon? how to register. How about what the sessions are going to be? We have sessions that are involved in a conference. So we're kind of looking at what are the big chunks first, and then we'll kind of get down into the thing. But we have one chunk of thing that we want to know is session. All right, so a session is a thing that happens. What are some other groups of, chunks of information that we're going to want to know about? A session has a presenter. So we have a presenter. We're going to want information about the presenter. One presenter could actually have the same presenter giving multiple sessions. We know we're going to just kind of assume that this conference is connected to everything is within this conference. I'm pointing to the conference thing. So we're not going to worry about making relations between it, but between the presenter and the session. Of course, this thing has not quite as big a screen. HDMI would have been so much nicer. Let me just get a doohickey. Oops, sorry about that. Okay. So the relationship between a presenter and a session is that a presenter, let's see, what is it? Control click to close, shift click to connect. All right, so the presenter is connected to the session. Each presenter has a session, and a presenter could actually have multiple sessions, and one session could have multiple presenters. And this is sort of information that we're going to want to keep track of. For the most part, on a lot of these things, I'm just going to tell you about it. I'm not going to actually show it. But there is notation that can be used to indicate what the relationships are. And generally, when you're modeling your information, you do want to know this. You need to know that this, you could have multiple of this, multiple of that, or that, there's one and only one, or this is optional. So I'm using what's called crow's feet notation, which is a really fancy way of saying it's like lines with lines on it. And for any given presenter, could have multiple sessions, and they're going to have at least one presenter. I think I've got that in the right direction. Yeah, we're going to do it both ways. But it has these little, basically the idea with this is that what these little, I don't know if you can see it, but right there is a little thing, and it is basically the line goes into the box. There, at the end of the line, there's a cross line, and then there's like 3 little diagonals coming out of it. It's kind of saying multiple things. And what that's saying, the line is saying there's at least one. The multiple lines pointing in are saying, but could be many. In the other direction, the same thing, one to many. There's some other, there's some other notation things to tell you that it's, you can have a one-to-one relationship, and it could be either optional or mandatory. That this must exist, or it could exist, but if it exists, there's only one. And then you have a lot of the many relationships. You could have optional to many, mandatory, optional to many, optional. There's just sort of that whole permutation. But you want to be paying attention to this, to these numbers and how it's going. What is the sort of the nature of the connections, because you need to know if you need to be able to do multiple of them, or if you just need to say, here's the answer. So we have a presenter and we have a session. So some of the information that we might have a session, as we have for the conference, is we would have, each session has a time, and each session has a location. Now, location is going to get used for more than one session. So we probably actually should have a thing for location. This is a very technical term, thing. But yeah, and I'm sorry that I'm not whiteboarding this, because it would have been a lot more straightforward and quick. So on the green, I can change all of that.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Shoot, I just closed it. Let's just open this up. That is actually a very good point about the difficulty to read. So I will change that. We're going to go in here and find out that nothing got saved. I have autosave on, but we're going to find out how good the autosave is. And the answer is, it did! Oh, yay! Hooray! We have autosave. All right, so what I meant to do was Command All. Thank you. And to tell it, the style would be, how about, oh, that's horrible. How about that? That's also horrible. Let's try this. How about that? Is that readable? All right, so we'll just do that to each of these. And I'm actually going to, if I could figure out how to close this thing, I would. That's not it. Okay, there we go. So I want to have some more room for you guys to actually see stuff. Except for I did that before getting rid of our poor little conference is going to stay over there with its blue thing. Sorry. We're not terribly interested in conference because that's pretty much information that's going to sort of one thing at the moment. So we may not get more exciting than that. Okay, so as I said, our location, let's see. So our location, we have, each session is in one location, but our other relationship the other way is each location will have multiple sessions at different times, which puts in our time here is, we're going to have, multiple sessions for the same location. And the fact that our location has this time information, that kind of takes care of, we don't have to have like a time relationship in the middle. Yes?
That was my question. But I thought it might make sense to have like a time slot.
Oh, very good. Time slot. Yes, because each time slot has multiple locations with your sessions in it. That's actually excellent. So, and of course, my little thing where I have to go reload my library because Draw.io is lovely, but I haven't figured some things out in it that I'm sure there's a way to do. Error, not a library file. Let's try that again. Open library. The library is, let's get the entity box. Okay, and the entity box is now going, I have to open this thing up again. Sorry, moment. See, they should have given me an electronic whiteboard. It would have been really nice. I want to save that, and I want to, I have to open that up again because I want to make that default because I want these stuff happening. So, do we have anybody in Zoom? I don't, they're recording it. And also I don't actually have it. Okay, so we should be good now. All right, so we got lots of things now. So I will get rid of this. All right, so you're right. So what we have here is what we just call a time slot. That was a good name for it. I like that. Time slot. So a time slot has a time and a location. See, this is why I want to do. Yeah, let's call it date and time, but we want to be clear. That's a very good point. We want to be clear, date and time. All right, so now over here, we're going to change this relationship. This is now actually to here. The location has a time slot. And over here, we don't have a time and location. We have a time slot. Is that right? Anyway, time slot, let's see. How does this relationship work? So we have a session which has a location and has a time. Oh, actually, we do want to have these things back there. I'm sorry. I was right. I got all excited and confused. All right, so, and I'm going to move these around so that we can see relationships. All right, so we have that's not very helpful. Each session has a location and has a time slot. And each session would only have one time slot, but each time slot could have multiple sessions because they'd be in different locations. Does this make this, have I got this all right? Because you came up with it. Is this capturing what we want to capture? Sure, she says. Let's indulge her. Meaning me. Indulge me on this. She's being very nice. Okay, so we have the session, we have that, we have speakers. Oh, we have speakers. Presenter over here, yes, we have our presenter. So our session, we need to have another little thing over here. Oh, that wasn't working. Control F. All right, so we need a presenter, and then we're going to move this little indicator down here. So we have a presenter. All right, so this is pretty, how are we doing on time? Oh, the time. We got 20 minutes. I can stop panicking so much. So we have sessions, locations, time slots, and presenters. Do we have any other big things that we need in order to make this make sense? I'm not really thinking that we do at the moment. So let's start actually thinking, what is the information that we would need to have within this? So a location, I guess that would be like, we want to go to buildings, say there's multiple buildings, and we want to go to the room. Oh, but wait, the room is always going to be in the same building. So let's not have that be building and room. That's going to be, I don't know what you call that, address, place, room, building and room, something like that. Building and room. Okay, building and room. What else do we need to look at? That's probably good enough. We're just going to work on the idea of what we need to present to the visitors. If we were doing stuff about what, including information that the organizers might need, we might want to have a lot more information in here. We might want to have things like the number of, how many people this room can hold, and all sorts of information like what, doesn't have a whiteboard, doesn't have a projector, all sorts of things like that. So we could actually get really quite complex in our information. This is being information. All information has all sorts of details and all sorts of relationships, but we don't always care about them. So we don't, in this case, since we're just doing this for the sake of the attendees, they have a whole nother thing they do for the people organizing. So we don't have to worry about that. So we're just going to pay attention to the information that we care about. That we're actually going to do something with. So this is a little bit where that we're not completely ignoring presentation because we're thinking, well, what are we actually going to present to people? What information are we going to present to them? Not how we're going to present it, but what we're going to present. And we don't need to have a completely every possible bit of information that might be related to anything ever. We just need the ones we care about. So in this case, we really just care about the building and the room because that's all attendees really care about. They want to know where it is. Unless there's anything else in the room that we need to know. I can't think of anything. Accessibility. That is actually a good thing. An attendee might want to know. All right. Okay, I can't. Access. Well, I hope I spelled that right. I probably didn't. I have to go back over here and take away our oops, date and time. Because this is already being dealt with in the time slot, and the time slot is just a thing. All right, time slot location. So our time slot, that would be, we'd have a start time, and end time. So that's pretty much all. That's pretty simple time slot. I don't think we need much more for that. So the session, we have times. Oops, my location is no longer pointing to location. Let's try to fix that. All right, there we go. So we have our location, going to our location, our presenter, going to presenter. What do we want to know about our presenter? Okay, their role. So it's sort of a role in this session. Their role in the session, which is actually connected to, now we've gotten complicated now, because our role is not just on the presenter, because it depends on the session. So it's actually another thing that would go in between the presenter and the session. So I think, let's get another box. We're going to call this. So this is presenter role. And now we're just going to ignore the fact that my arrows aren't going to the sort of aren't the right relationship necessarily. All right, and then our presenter. Let's the presenter role. Okay, so let's get this so we can see more of what we're doing. All right, so we have a session that is now actually going to have a presenter role and a presenter. Some information that we might want to know about the presenter would be, well, let's start with their name, but then their bio. So let's see what's the things like this. All right, so we want their bio. We might want to presenter, who they are. Now, here's some things where we start thinking about sort of both presentation and like with the bio. Because there's things you can include in a bio, like what company they currently work for, what university they're with, what department they're with in the university, what their background is, what their, what they have their degree in. It's all sorts of bits of information. And if we want to have certain bits of information consistent across all of our presenters, then we might start thinking here, and this is sort of thinking about terms of entry of information. We might want to start thinking about having separate fields for that. It's like, we want to know what their affiliation is. We always want to know that. Or we might decide, hey, this is like a casual conference, and people can just tell us what they want to. And so we have to sort of make some decisions at this point about how structured are we going to get in this. So I think for the moment, we're going to say it's a casual little one. Otherwise, I'd say, all right, we're going to have an affiliation field we might have as a separate thing. Or we might just have it as a field. So we might have this affiliation bio just as a field that gets filled out. So as you're going through, you're thinking a little bit about how granular you want to get for what you want to do with the information. Maybe what you want to, like, for example, we might also have, address. The address might be if we were doing the organizer side, because they wanted to, to mail them a packet full of stuff. But we might want just the address to be, just a blob of text, because we don't really care about that. But what if we cared about where they came from, because we wanted to have a list of, oh, look, we have people from all these different places. We don't really want their address. We want their, like, state or something. And that's another thing we'd be thinking about, about an information a little bit on the, what do we want to present? How do we want to use it? So then I think we have a pretty, we're kind of, our simple little thing is getting more and more complex, and it could get very complex depending on what we're presenting or, what our information is. But the next stage is to start looking at, this is our information model. This is what information is that we're dealing with. The next thing is like, how are we going to implement this in Drupal? And this is very often sort of a starting presumption that each of our things might be a content type. I say might be because usually it's, sometimes we're going to change our mind about what it is. But you sort of start with, maybe this is a content type. So let's just kind of start with that assumption. We'll kind of go through it until we decide that, yeah, okay, this is, it makes sense for it to be a content type, or it makes sense for it to not be a content type. Usually, the very common other thing that it might be is a content type, or it could be a vocabulary, taxonomy vocabulary. It could be a being block. Say we have some little bits of information, but they're kind of discrete and we want to have them around and stuff, but we don't ever really want a page that lands on it and that's all that gets shown. You know? Well, the usefulness for taxonomy is, for example, location is a good thing that we might do as a taxonomy. And the like a content type of taxonomy can have additional fields. So in our case, you know, the sort of main, you know, the term, as it were, would be the building in the room. So Cypress North Trestle. And we'd have another additional field to give the accessibility information. Then whenever we're, you know, link it into our sessions and things. If we have it as a taxonomy, Drupal automatically gives us a page that lists all the things that have that taxonomy. So instead of having to go create a view, a special view, to show here's all the locations of the sessions that are happening in, we just, Drupal's kind of done that for us. We've got a taxonomy, we click the term, you know, on any page it shows up, and then we go to this page which shows all of the things that have this. So you can see all of the presenters, the sessions that are in this, that use that location. So taxonomy, it's kind of doing some work for you. It also has some other things about being able to do relationships. And so it makes it easier to say we want to be a view that has all of the locations that have, I don't know what it is. Yeah, all the, you know, I don't know, all the locations that have a session on a certain day. You know, it's sort of a taxonomy is a sort of an easier way to kind of identify what that is. If it was just sort of free form, Drupal wouldn't really know how to necessarily have as many options for making relationships. The other thing is a taxonomy can be hierarchical, which we might want to do in this case if we have buildings and then rooms within the buildings. So that would be something where we could, and that would give us the ability to, just with this one thing of being able to say it's kind of grab all the ones that are in a certain building, because the taxonomy would know that this room is under that building. So there's things like that that the taxonomy can use, but it's, you know, it's sort of, you know, a lot of these things you could do them in multiple ways because Drupal is that way. You can do things with a lot of different approaches. And so you're trying to figure out how you know, going to use it and what sort of makes sense with it. Taxonomy, a lot of times I think of, you know, sort of the most basic form is if you have a same thing that's going to be entered a whole bunch of times, you know, to different places, and you want to make sure that the entry of it is the same. So for example, building and room, you don't want someone to type it as, you know, Tressiter, comma, Cypress N, one place, and as Cypress North in Tressiter in another place. You want to have a consistency of information for like one field. So if this is, in a sense, if you think of location as the you know, let's say session is a content type, because that pretty much usually is the case. So, you know, this is you want to land on a session and see all the details about it. So location, in a sense, is sort of like a field on session, and the kind of field it is a taxonomy vocabulary called location. And a lot of what it's doing really is just making that consistency of entry when it's the sort of thing that, you know, people could. You need to know what it is. We want to have it sort of information, and we sort of want this built-in extra stuff that we can get from the stuff that taxonomy gives extra. So like, you know, click on it, goes through a list of all the things that have been tagged with it. Which means like if we had, in addition to sessions, we had parties, we could also use location for parties. And then we could click on the link and we'd see all of the sessions and parties that are happening in that same location. So that's sort of a thing. That's a divert, can't think of what the word is now, sidetrack onto taxonomy. But so probably, yeah, location I probably do as a taxonomy. So this would be my location field over here. when I start working on the data model, I start putting in here what kind of thing it's going to be. And so this is going to be a term reference. Is the kind of and I usually use color coding for indicating what these things are in the headers, but with this, we want you to be able to see it. So we're going to say that's vocabulary. In the session, we're going to say that's a content type. So, sorry about this. Content type. So the time slot, probably, I'd probably say another. I'd probably also put that as a term reference. It could be, I'll say all these things could be done different ways, but we might want to see what's happening all at the same time. Actually, it's really convenient because say what's happening all at this time, so I can see all of the. I could have like a thing that's just sort of listing teasers for all of them instead of just like plain titles, or like how do I decide which one I want in this session? So that could be kind of nice. So we'll have to say that's term reference. The presenter. Oops, this is actually not presenter role. It's a little bit presenter. Type presenter role. So the presenter role, this probably because we're not going to want to ever go to a page that's presenter role. Probably. Well, no, I'm wrong. I'm actually thinking that the way to do, because like this is, we have presenters. No, that still doesn't work. We need presenter role. Add what? Yeah. Yes. So this is really presenter role in session, actually. So this would just be the role, and I probably would do this one because I don't think we want a landing page, page to land on for this. I'd probably do this as a bean block. So this is just the field is just a text field really to say what the role is. And these are and this is a presenter end role. And so I'd say we'll probably do this as a bean block so that, come on. Presenter end role. So it's presenter in session. That's why I'm getting role, presenter. We're going to ignore that I can't spell. Session. And so I probably do this in, say, bean block. And then my presenter is going to be another content type, because that's a thing we want to land on. We have our various things here. And as we're going, so this is where I start kind of going, this is what I'm going to do with it. And we have this, since the role, this is presenter and role, you probably actually need another vocabulary for the different role positions. So you'll find as you're start fleshing out, how am I going to implement this? Your information model as well, it's going to get more, may get more detailed, or may get some things cut off where you say, I really don't care about this. I don't need to know where they were born. I don't need to know their address with a whole bunch of different things. Another thing that a lot of times, sometimes people come into, if it's a bean block, might be a bean block, or it might be, what is that called? A field collection. Very often we'll have, like if we were doing addresses, and we didn't have a module that already did it. We would probably make a field collection for the address if we really needed to know the address and know what the individual bits were so we could know what state they came from. We'd use a field collection. Probably. So this, just as you see, kind of starts getting, you start putting in what the various, actual structures are going to be. And as you notice, we have some, decisions to make up this, vocabulary versus content type and all this sort of thing. A given information model can have multiple different data models and implementations of how it's done. It's not a thing where, that's kind of what the difference is between the information model and the data model. Is the information model is what's without the information, but it could be implemented multiple different ways. And you have one way to get implemented. You can have multiple ways it gets implemented in Drupal, depending on what your favorite modules and ways of doing things are. It could get implemented differently if it's done in WordPress or something else. But the modeling part is really quite similar across the different things that you might be doing, especially with information modeling. And one of the things that I find really helpful is to start thinking about this in advance before I start really building something, to start thinking about, and especially working with clients, trying to get them to think about what's the information and try to get them to do it. Very often with clients, they're very focused on what's going to be on what page. And if you notice, we haven't really talked about very much about what's on page, except when we had our taxonomy question. It's really actually kind of good because that gives that illustration of what the difference is. We haven't really talked about where it's going to go and what's going to be on the left and what's going to be on the, the top and what's in the bottom and, what's going to, lead where. We're not really worried about that because we're trying to get the information in. And our idea is we want to put the information in once, and then we have the freedom to put it wherever we want, multiple times. We can have our list of presenters by where they're from and our list of presenters by the sessions they're in and then by their roles and by any number of different things. They could show up 17 different times on the site, and we've only entered their information once. So actually probably information you want on presenter is probably not actually address. It's probably things like email or website. Yeah, let's do website. That's what people who visit are actually going to care about, the attendees. And you'll notice, I had this conference off on the side. The basic information about a conference, its name, its location, the general dates and stuff like that. Usually that's something where, we're going to have sort of a page of information that has that, or maybe we'll have a block and we'll place it a bunch of different places. So it's kind of, it's not necessarily connected into anything else because it's, in a sense, it's kind of like everywhere, but, it's sort of its own discrete thing. It's not that each, we could go, each conference has multiple sessions, but we only have one conference. And all of the sessions belong to that conference. So we don't need to make an explicit, necessarily need to make an explicit relationship there. We could in our information model, it probably wouldn't be bad, but, and so this is really kind of the idea. Now this is actually, as you saw as we go along, we start thinking of more things of how the information relates to what we want to do with it. And it can get really complicated. This is my simple little, let's have a conference, it's straightforward. Well, we have a few things. Well, no, they always blow up like this. Let me save this, because whenever I open a new thing, it doesn't, oh, we're over. The last thing I'll do is I will show you, one that I did for Stanford Fabrication Facility. And I will get rid of this sidebar. Oh, wait, it's not open. Come on. There we go. I'll get rid of this sidebar so you can see more. Oh, it's not going to do that. All right. So, and I'm going to zoom out so you can see more of it because it's, you can't see. Let's go to 25%. It's really small. So this is the relation, and this is only partway through. I haven't been keeping up. We actually have, it's more complex than this now. And you can see there's a lot of stuff going on here. There's a lot of arrows and connections and relationships. And this has been tremendously helpful as we were building it out, and also as documentation. It's one of it's bad that I'm behind on keeping up to date with what we've actually done, because as I go and build things, I go in and make sure that we call this the spider web. It's kind of what it looks like. The official name of this is an entity relationship diagram, or ERD. Spider web works. Going in and what these relationships are helps us know that, if somebody else, if I were to win the lottery, my husband and I would win the lottery tomorrow, and we were around the world cruising, and SNF needed to know how something was done. They need to bring in a new Drupal expert. The new Drupal expert would be able to come in and get some idea without having to reverse engineer the site of what's going on. And note that this information model and stuff, I think, don't confuse it with the actual databases that Drupal is creating and running. We're letting Drupal take care of what Drupal does with its data, with its database, its tables, and all that stuff. We don't really care. We do care when we're building a site, but we're not really caring for the information model, and even to an extent our data model, because we're thinking in terms of what it is we're implementing, and we let Drupal be Drupal. So this is not a picture of the MySQL databases. I don't even want to think about drawing that map. That'd get really interesting really fast. So I think I probably should stop there because we are over time. And I'm sorry for all the adventures in technical things. I hope you got something out of this. Are there any questions before we go, or you can come up and ask? Yeah, it's when I started doing this, I was just like, it just makes things so much easier. It's just makes, and you can even say, I do it in this thing, and it makes 11-minute draft, and then we could say that you have it as documentation. But I've done it on whiteboards. I've done it with 3x5 cards. It doesn't have to be technically exciting in how you do it, but it's the process of going through and thinking, what are your things? What are the pieces of information associated with it? Which of those pieces are actually their own thing? So yeah, go forth and use. Are you guys? How many of you guys are Stanford associated? Anybody? Nobody's Stanford. Okay. I have business cards. If you want to take business cards, if you ever want to get in touch or anything. And I have the Stanford ones in my pocket, of course, because yesterday was Stanford Day. Any other questions or comments?
Where's your sweet spot for stopping clients that internal and going through this exercise through development and after discovery, hard discovery, sprint one, pre-sprint?
I would do this in discovery. I would do the information part in discovery. Not necessarily not the data modeling, because that's sort of, you don't necessarily need the client right there for that. But the information model, the only person who actually knows what is the information and the nature of the information and what's involved in the information is the client. And actually, if I zoom in and show you some of this, I mean, let's do 150%, make sure you guys can see. Oh, maybe that's a little too much. Okay, so like this is one of my figs. It is a piece of equipment. And the pieces of information that we have in here is, the name and the badger ID. What the heck's a badger ID? I would never know what that is. We have what materials, what's supplied, primary materials, other materials, substrate sizes and types and the location and the cleanliness. And let me tell you, you don't know what cleanliness means because it's specific to this thing and the maximum load and resist and all this stuff. And, we have all sorts of things. And then what do we know about other chemicals? We want to know their formula and their name. And these are things that, a lot of this information, what I have to do as the web person working with them in the sense of the discovery is I have to extract from them what is your information and start helping them think about it in a structured way because usually they're thinking in terms of, I want a page of this, and I want a page of that, and I want to be able to do this. And we can do all of those things if we know what the information is that's supposed to be in there, and we get that information structured, so it's not just random blobs of text that we have to enter wherever we want to see it, but we can enter it into our data and have it spit out however they want. And so this is, this is actually the information modeling is part of discovery. Whether you do it in a formal way where you're mapping it out, or whether you do it, you know, sort of talking to them. But the thing that you have to, you know, the place where it means is, you know, you're the person who knows how to do this web stuff, and they're the person who understands the information and understands what it is, what the pieces of information are. And one of the challenges is trying to get them to tell you about that, but then to tell you about what web pages they want and where the menu should be. That what? I have not hit that point with any of my projects. This project is, this one has the most complex data that I have dealt with. The second most complex one that I dealt with was the Stanford Language Center, where they have 16 programs, and amongst the programs, they have 57 languages. And that was a lot of, and then of course you've got courses, you've got professors, you've got exam times for placement. I mean, we had all sorts of stuff going on that one, but this one is more complex. And it's actually a bit more complex than this now because there may be a point when one would say as Drupal's not right for it. I don't really know what it is. I think when you get to a certain size, a pretty big size in terms of pieces of information and complexity of relationships and stuff, where it's not so much Drupal isn't appropriate, but where you probably do need to not just do things through the contributed modules. This site is completely done with contributed modules. There's no custom code whatsoever. When you start getting super big, especially if you have lots of traffic, you know, grannies.com, they're not just using contributed modules. They're doing some customized, optimized. You know, they're not using custom modules to define sort of what I can't think of what the word is now. You know, the TPL, PHP things. They're actually going in and making those lean and mean and show just what they want. They're not doing it through the web interface. But that's more of a, you know, that's kind of what they're doing is they're optimizing. But they're still, Drupal is still handling it just fine. So I would say there comes a point when you are going to, when you do really need to get into code what you can safely and maintainably get into code. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing is sometimes the other thing that there is like sometimes if you have a tremendous amount of data, especially if you have existing data in some existing database, sometimes what you'll actually do is you will have Drupal call on that data to pull it in to show. So you don't necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily always have everything in Drupal. But personally, I've got things where we're pulling data from elsewhere because that's where the data lives. We aren't managing it. Anything that somebody else does that you can just take advantage of is always a good thing. You know, this is one of sort of the principles. If you don't want to reinvent any wheels, you don't need to reinvent. So, for example, at Stanford, they have this thing called Stanford Profiles, where every staff member and faculty member has a profile with their name and their role and department and all that kind of information. And so instead of when we build a partner website, instead of us having to enter all that information, we just hook up to that data and we pull in, hey, we want these guys things. And we actually have these guys, meaning the people who are in this list that we maintain with another thing that's integrated in. So sometimes you're pulling in information from someplace that already exists, that you don't need to put it into Drupal. You don't need to recreate that wheel. You just need to sort of pull it in and show it. But as at the scale that I'm working on, and you're saying this is, pretty complex. I have not hit it yet where I need to go elsewhere. I'm not dealing with things that are getting the kind of traffic Grammys gets. So I don't need to do that. But Drupal, I mean, Grammys.com, at least the last how many years has been done, I know it's been done in Drupal, some other company that does it. And they get very sophisticated and exciting in how they do it. I don't get that sophisticated and exciting. Of course, one of the other things is as I'm building this thing, we have the intention that SNF themselves, their staff members, who are not web people, they are, nano scientists. They're responsible for this content. We're building the structures, and there's a small group of them that I'm teaching how to maintain and adjust and modify these structures. But we're building this with the idea that they're not going to need me forever unless they want to keep adding stuff. We have a big long list of stuff to add, so I'm hoping you will keep me there forever because we can always think of new and exciting things that we've done. There's no for this one this one that the data has gone from it was on a static website, and then they needed a lot of stuff for a lot of people to edit it, so it was on a wiki, and the wiki server was dying, so then they moved sort of everything to Google Docs, and then they said, thank you. They're like, yeah, we needed to better solution to this. So right now we are in a sense pulling some data from Google Docs in that we have various pages of documentation for a particular tool where what the Drupal page is partly or primarily showing the Google Doc in page. And someday when they start really editing and changing and stuff, all the data, it might not just be showing the Google Doc, it might be in the Drupal thing. But that's because they have a ton of this stuff that's already over there. They don't have time to. Yeah, I just use kind of, this is actually built in Stanford sites, where not only am I only using contributed modules, I'm only using the contributed modules that Stanford sites platform will let me have. Which is not all it does, what we're doing with that, it's an iframe. I've got it set up where the content editors are only entering the URL. They're not doing any of the iframe part. And the iframe part is all provided using Display Suite and whatever else. Because I don't want the editors, they have some editors who are just, really, they just run these tools and they don't care about the web and they're not going to learn about the web. So it's like, put the URL into Google Doc. Thank you. And so for that, it is showing, it's like showing a movie on YouTube, except for I'm showing a Google Doc. Because we have this, basically we're kind of going through these transitions. We're using Drupal as like the goal endpoint, where eventually we would like to get all this stuff actually in Drupal, be much more useful and interactive if we do that. Because a Google Doc is basically a big, huge blob of text that has no meaning to anybody. You have to be a human person reading it for it to have any meaning. You can't make use of it in sort of having information show up in different places. It only shows up there. So eventually that would be our ideal. But in the meantime, we've got hundreds and hundreds of these things. And we're going to be really happy when we have a Drupal page for each of these documents that they have. That will be an exciting day. Never mind getting it actually in. So in some sense, we're peeking at some other data, but we're not really pulling in stuff for this. We did some importing of some tables into Drupal and have Drupal be where it lives, and sort of one-time importing. But For this project, it doesn't really make sense to have another database. To have an external database that we're calling on because it's it doesn't already exist, and Drupal is the thing that there's been the most easy for them to manage. One of the things that will be nice in the long run, eventually, when it's all in Drupal, is they'll have one place to go to maintain this. At the moment, they have this Googlebot thing. It's less than ideal, but we want the thing live. Especially before the old wiki. The old wiki is still up, but its server is going to die any day. But yeah, so it's any other. Yeah, so come get a card if you'd like a card. I will make sure there's a link to my website, my really old website that hasn't had changes in years because the shoemaker's still going to have them too. Thank you.